Karen Wagner, you were the costume designer on Underground, with which you were tasked with recreating the antebellum South. Obviously, you can't go out to JCPenney and buy these fashions. So what was the greatest challenge that you faced in doing it?
Well, as you said, there is no 1857 Walmart or JCPenney available. I wish there was, but we had to recreate almost everything from the era. We built a lot of things. We started out by building a lot of things in stock, just so we had a number of sizes and everything. We were able to rent some, but for the most part, we had to find period appropriate fabrics. Unfortunately, my budget didn't allow for creating fabrics or, anything like that. So we had to do the best we could with the fabrics we could find.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
No, so we started sort of this mass building project, which was actually really so much fun. I think it's every costume designer's dream to be able to control every detail of the world that they're creating, that they're helping the writers create.
Mm-hmm. So what kind of research did you do to find out what kind of period appropriate fabrics you had to use? And
I did a lot of different kinds of research to start the process on Underground. I was very lucky to have visited the Victoria and Albert Museum a number of years ago, and they have a room upstairs. It's just got thousands of swatches available for you to actually view. You can't touch them, but you can actually view them. So I remembered some of that. I remembered the heaviness of the fabrics, the sort of density. And I have done some other projects that are sort of in and around this time period. So I already knew something about the printing processes at the time and which classes or, which people in what monetary circumstances would have access to which fabrics. So that was a help. But I did a lot of research. I have a huge library at home. I'm kind of a book hoarder, which is something I don't know if I should admit out loud. So I did a lot of that, and I did a lot of work on the internet. And there were some period garments available at one of the rental houses in Los Angeles, so I looked at that as well. I did a lot of flea market searching and touching and oogling, and I looked at a lot of period. There's some great books out about this era. And I found myself, interestingly enough, looking at the faces of the people in the daguerreotypes. And for some reason that helped inform my choices. The looks on their faces, the looks in their eye, really informed a lot of character choices I make, which of course inform fabric choices.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned class, and that was one of the things I wanted to ask you about, because one of the great things about this show is the way that obviously there's a difference between what the slaves are wearing and what their masters are wearing, but there's even a difference in the fabrics of the North and the South and the different levels of economic class there. So I wonder if you could talk a bit more about that.
Well, there's a huge difference in the class system, obviously, between slaves and their masters, their owners, but also between the slave catchers, who were in a way poorer than the slaves. So the slaves were assured some food, and they were assured a place to live, and the slave catchers were not. The slave catchers lived very rough. I mean, I'm not saying that they had it worse by any standard, don't misunderstand me, but their fabrics are a whole nother. There were several groupings of fabrics and costumes and color palettes. The slave catchers were one. The slaves were one. The wealthy landowners, plantation owners, and then the house slaves were another class subdivision. Mm-hmm. And then there were the Northerners, and there were the abolitionists, and there were freed persons of color in the North. So there was all these different little, it's a very complicated time in history that history books tend to sort of simplify. but the more you dig into it, the more you discover that it's so complicated. The era is so complicated. So I tried to give the sort of broad strokes of each grouping of people sort of having their own color palette and having their own group of fabrics, so that you would at least sort of know who you were talking to. You know, who, when somebody new came in frame, you would get a sense of what group they belong to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, clothing is so integral in that way of establishing who a person is right away. Yeah. So I wonder if you could talk a bit about sort of the practicality of this, because not only do you have to design all these different clothes, but you've in some cases got to design multiples of certain outfits because they're going to get dirty and wet and bloody. You've got to dress thousands.
All of those things.
Yeah.
Training in the swamps of Baton Rouge. It's all of those things.
Yeah. So could you talk a bit about, just from a practical standpoint, of having to, of how you created all these clothes?
Yeah, let me think about that for a sec. So in creating all these clothes, the practicalities are often not practical at all. The labor pool of people that can make costumes in Baton Rouge is quite small, and there were a lot of other productions going on at the same time. So I had work spread out pretty much all over the country. I had a shop in Baton Rouge, and then I had another shop working for me in New Orleans. Then I had a shop making women's clothing, like the higher end women's clothing, in Los Angeles, and another shop in Los Angeles making the higher end men's clothing. And then I had a manufacturing plant that was doing some work for me in Los Angeles also. And then I was flying in people from Dallas and around the country to make specific special costumes. So it took, I had a workroom. Oh, and then I also had the local sewing ladies in and around. I call them the quilting ladies. They're ladies who make quilts, or they make, like Halloween costumes for the local people. And they do a certain kind of thing really well. That, things that can't be super perfect, that can't be super finished. They do that kind of constructed but unfinished thing perfectly. So they took a group of clothing and did that. So I had all these different people working for me, and I had one person who did nothing but coordinate getting the fabric to them, getting the drawings to them, making sure that I got on the phone at the right time with the right person to explain what it was that I wanted, and to make sure that I went over the strong points of each drawing. And it was a tremendous machine. It was just constantly like churning out drawings every day, and I had buyers in Los Angeles looking for fabric. It was amazing. It was amazing. We must have, I think we didn't do an exact count, but my estimate is that we churned out around 7,000 or 8,000 costumes over the course. And I'm talking about all the pieces.
Wow.
Costumes over the course of, and so many of them in multiples because of the mud, the blood, and the wet.
Yeah. So you've had quite a bit of experience throughout feature films and in television. I wonder if you could talk a bit about some of the differences between working in the two. Is there much of a difference, or
between television and film?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the speed at which you work, the resources you have, or just any different kind of thing.
The differences between film and television are so different. They're so vast that I like to say that I have two brains. That I'll put on my feature brain for a feature, which is where everything can sort of be discussed, and I interact with the director a lot, and I'm able to interact with the actors a lot, and we're able to go through a series of drawings and swatches and take our time and make everything perfect. And then there's my TV brain, which is just go with your gut, whatever your gut says is best, because we have no time to churn out these costumes, and you've got to keep running, because you've kind of, TV is kind of like a hamster wheel in a way. If you stop running for a minute, you end up you know how the hamster ends up hanging upside down for a minute if he stops running. I feel like that would happen to me if I stopped moving so fast in television. So there's a lot less adornment. Television is about color and silhouette, whereas in a feature, you can get into the beautiful, fine hand embroideries and hand finishings, you know, for a period garment. But in television, you just gotta keep going. You gotta move fast.
What's amazing though is that you know, it feels as if, at least as a viewer, the standard of quality for what you are going to do in television seems to have gotten better. I mean, as in, like, you're trying as best you can to make it look like a feature film, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, absolutely, without question. We are making feature films every week. We're making really. Television's very exciting that way now, because we're making, like, Underground was a 10-hour feature. It wasn't really, it didn't feel to me like episodic. It felt to me as if this big long story was unspooling, and all the things you wonder about when you walk out of a period feature, like, well, I wonder what that side story was, and I wonder what that, you know, and that person who just kind of breezed through frame, I wonder what their story was. And with a 10-hour feature, you can actually explore all those characters, which is so wonderful. I mean, as somebody who loves story, that's fascinating. But yes, it is some extra work to be doing period in television, without question, because you are expected to turn in, and not that I would do it any differently, but a certain quality is expected that I don't know if it used to be.
Mm-hmm. So you just got renewed for a second season.
Mm-hmm.
What can we expect from season 2?
I have no idea. I haven't heard a word of what's. I'm as excited as you to find out. I wish I knew.
Well, do you still have a lot of work ahead of you in the next episodes to come? I mean, is it going to change much at all, or you got any new characters that you got to? Well,
I'm guessing. I mean, I honestly do not know what the second season is about, except in the very vaguest of terms, and that was a generality, that was a possibility. So I really seriously have no information for you about the next season. But I do know that there will be some changes of venue. I'm sure there will be new characters, and I'm very excited to explore and to be able to, you know, you have all these little things you want to do as a costume designer, and they just don't always fit into the characters you have. So I'm really looking forward to having like a whole new bunch of people to character.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a fantastic show, and thank you so much. I look forward to your work on season 2.
Thank you very much. Thanks. It was an honor to be interviewed. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too.